You're tuned in to The Money Movement, your one stop for 100% Canadian financial management content. This isn't just another podcast. This is a movement. Here's your host, Graydon Racine.
You have tuned in to The Money Movement podcast. I am your host, Graydon Racine, and today is the first edition of our newest segment. Every week, I am going to be reviewing the biggest news in the Canadian business industry. A lot of this is going to affect your wallet, your job, and our economy. So without further ado, let's get into this week's topic, unemployment rates in Canada. This week's top Canadian business story that affects you is the unemployment numbers. The month of May, Canada added roughly 28,000 jobs, bringing the unemployment rate to an all-time low all the way back to where the very first government organization started recording this data in 1976. Now, this is just more evidence that Canada as a whole is really starting to get out of that recession and recover from it, which is really impressive considering the trade disputes that we've been having going on between provinces and over the last 2 years, really regarding oil, lumber, and a variety of other issues. Now, it's important to note that this isn't just actually impressive. This is just amazing because the unemployment rate in the country is actually outstanding considering the issues we faced when it comes to international trade. I mean, in the last 4 years, we've seen the renegotiation of the Northern American Free Trade Agreement, that's NAFTA, imposed tariffs from the Trump administration, and just to add a little bit of salt to that wound for the fact that we're arguing with our number one ally, the Huawei incident that has triggered China to begin doing random inspections of Canadian products such as wheat and pork. Now, all in all, considering the massive amount of challenges the country has been facing, we seem to be finding our balance and actually beginning to thrive again. Now, obviously, the level of prosperity is going to be different among each province. For instance, Albertans will certainly have a different mindset when it comes to this news compared to, say, residents of Ontario. Now, I should probably also mention that this isn't just May that we're seeing this spiking. Overall, Canada has added roughly 500,000 jobs in the last year, which is good news for every single Canadian. But Friday's report really reaffirms that the labor market is the main driver of Canada's expansion and adds to a recent run of data showing clear signs that the country is on a path of growth, really after stalling last year or kind of at a halt. Now, of course, you're probably wondering where this growth is coming from. You may not be seeing this massive increase in jobs on a day-to-day basis, especially if it's in your own province. You might be going through kind of a decline or a massive battle over resources and maybe some laws that are making it nearly impossible for your province to prosper. Well, there are 3 provinces relatively immune from the recent weakness in the oil sector. No surprise here, Ontario, British Columbia, and Quebec seem to be doing fine. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you live in the country, they're mostly responsible for the growth in the employment. Most of the service-related industries that are given this growth include transportation, technology, professional employment. So what does this mean for you? Well, if you live in Ontario, Quebec, or British Columbia, you should probably start scouring the world of job postings online because if you're unemployed this time, it is time for you to find a job. There are lots of them out there. Now, if you're already employed and you're thinking, oh, this doesn't concern you, think again. This is a perfect time for you to really reevaluate where you're at in your career. Are you on a good path to your current job? Are they treating you with respect? Maybe, helping you grow, prepping you to one day take that bigger role? If you answer no to any of those, I'm sorry, but you got to get the hell out of there. Now, if you're in any of the provinces such as Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, or down east such as Nova Scotia, I really suggest doing something a little bit different. Don't get me wrong, you should always be looking for a way to improve your career, whether it's through additional training, schooling, or even leaving to a different company. But the rest of the country is in a little bit of a difficult situation at the moment, specifically Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Nova Scotia. Now, these 4 ballsy provinces are going toe-to-toe with the federal government in hopes of deeming a mandatory carbon tax unconstitutional. These provinces are having issues with the struggling oil and gas sector that is honestly, inevitably, is trickling down to the other sectors such as commercial real estate and even the housing markets. You don't believe me? Let's just take a look at Calgary, Alberta as a good example here. In May, Statistics Canada came out with a report saying that Calgary had the highest unemployment rate in the country, in the entire country. The unemployment rate was 7.6% of the population. Now, to really put that in perspective for you, the population of Calgary is roughly, 1.3 million people. That means roughly 100,000 people are out of work. Now, obviously, the numbers are a little bit staggered due to children being unable to work, but just that sheer magnitude of 100,000 people, it speaks for itself. Now, let's throw a little bit of another problem in there. Since we're talking about how the struggling oil and gas sector is really trickling down to bigger issues, might as well cover that as well. Now, obviously, some of these unemployment rates are due to the oil and gas sector or indirectly influenced by it, such as the downtown vacancy rate in the city of Calgary. The core of Calgary used to be stacked with tall buildings, rented out to oil and gas company headquarters, tech industries, and financial firms. But now, due to the collapse of the oil and gas sector, the vacancy rate of the downtown core in Calgary is 27.8%. That means roughly 30% of the entire office space in the downtown core is empty. And the collapse of the oil and gas sector is really, let's be honest, mostly to blame. Now, this evolved into this massive beast of its own, with small business owners throughout the city having a massive spike in their tax just to cover the city's own ass and to help alleviate some of the tax burden by missing income that normally came from that downtown sector. Now, this in itself is going to push a lot of small business in the city of Calgary really to the breaking point. I'm predicting if the city doesn't get its shit together, we could see an even bigger economic collapse to the 1.3 million people living in Calgary. Now, to sum everything up, overall Canada is rebounding from the tough recession, and people in the provinces that don't rely mostly on oil and gas sector, you guys' future, it's looking absolutely beautiful with that massive increase of 28,000 jobs just added in the month of May alone, and a historically low unemployment rate as a whole, as the country as a whole, which is looking really good. But for the provinces that are taking the battle to the federal government, good luck. It's going to be one hell of a fight.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of The Money Movement, brought to you by NextGen Wealthy. Be sure to follow us on all your social media platforms and subscribe to us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Remember, this isn't just a podcast, this is a movement.